Welcome everyone to Lady in Waiting 222's YouTube channel. My name is Charlene Jean-Pierre. I am a life purpose and strategy coach as well as the founder of Lady in Waiting 222, which is a blog that I started probably about a year and a half ago to encourage women, either single, married, divorced, widowed, to become God's best right now while they're waiting. And so I have the awesome privilege of introducing a young woman that I met about 2 weeks ago at a Bible study. I'm new to the Houston area and just was wanting to connect with other like-minded women in the area. And so I went to a Bible study, and the message was so on point, was so timely, and just how she shared her transparency with me and with the whole group, I should say. I just asked her if I could interview her and for her to share her story in light of everything that's been going on around the world with the weather, on the news and the media, just to encourage other people that God is still sovereign, He's still faithful, He's still good. And so with that being said, I wanted to introduce everyone to Miss Dalita Savage. Thank you so much for being willing to interview with me here.
Absolutely. You're very welcome, and thank you for having me. It's a privilege.
Good, good. And so, Dalita, I want you to just tell everyone what you do, who you are, and anything else you would like to share with anyone.
Okay. Well, as Charlene stated, my name is Talita Savage, and I am a lifestyle and business strategist for women entrepreneurs, not just those that are in the church, although I do run a ministry, but those that are just looking to branch out and use their God-given gifts to make an impact in the world. But the Bible study that Charlene mentioned is actually a part of a nonprofit ministry that I run called Arise Fellowship. And we do that twice a month and have been doing it probably for about the last year, a little over a year now. So we are just launching out into the deep and getting started and just expanding our impact for women.
Okay. Well, thank you again. I'm just so excited. As I share with you, just how transparent you shared your story as being I don't even want to say a survivor. You're more than a survivor of Hurricane Harvey. But I just felt like people need to hear that just in light of everything that's been shed in the news about some things that I've heard. I don't know if you heard about Hurricane Harvey and, why would God allow this and all of that. And so your story just really, really resonated so deeply with me. So I guess we'll start from the beginning, wherever you want to start, and just in terms of, well, actually, she started the Bible study was called Reserved by God. And so I'll just let you kind of talk it, share the story however the Lord leads you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you. So yeah, the title was Reserved by God. And the reason that title came to me and resonated with me was because everywhere that I went during my evacuation during Hurricane Harvey, when I showed up, it was like everything that I needed was already there. God had already provided everything that I needed. Now, it may not have been what I wanted, right? It wasn't always comfortable, but everything that I needed was present in the place that I went. And so from that experience for me, I didn't want to just go through it in a natural sense, with natural understanding, with the natural emotions that come up during something devastating like that, like the rest of the world, right, has been reacting to.
Right.
But I needed to find the spiritual significance of it. I think sometimes we spend so much time blaming God for what's not right in our lives that we fail to look at it as a blessing, And so the message was essentially that instead of blaming God for our circumstances or our situations that dislodged us and made us uncomfortable, to look at it in a place of God's provision. And I know some people are probably, thinking, how in the world could our city flooding be provision from God? But when you have the right perspective and you understand that He is a loving Father that would never bring more on you than you can bear, then even the bad becomes good. To quote that scripture, that all things work together for our good, But it's not until you're in those moments and you start finding the little jewels that God left in the devastation that you realize that even the bad was reserved by God for good. Of the I guess one of the foundational principles or wisdom, I gained from the whole experience. So a little bit more of what happened to me specifically. I was living in Katy in an area that is not entirely a flood zone, although we were right up against one of the reservoirs, but we didn't expect to flood. We all went home expecting, maybe the parking lot to be flooded or, to get the heavy rain, but not to be evacuated. And so that Sunday, though, when I was standing out on my balcony watching the waters rise, I got a knock on my door downstairs that says, "You have 20 minutes to evacuate. The water could be up to 20 feet.
Oh, wow.
20 minutes to evacuate
Wow.
because
Oh
the
my
water
God.
could get up to 20 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, it's kind of like still morning. I'm off from work, so I'm lounging around, right? Got my robe on and just kind of chilling that day. So I rush back upstairs and start getting dressed and trying to think, what do you grab in 20 minutes? Your whole life is in this place, but what's most important? And so I started gathering some of the things that I felt I would need right away. And there came another knock. You need to get out now. And so, just in that moment, though, I took the time to acknowledge my Father and to know that God, this is happening to me, but I'm not here by myself. I'm not alone. Even though technically it was just me and my dog in the apartment, I knew that God was already ordering my steps. And so I leaned on that and, thank God I got all of the important things out that I needed. But we were evacuated by boat. And prior to the storm, though, God had given me Psalms 46 just to meditate on that. And I had been meditating on the fact that even though the waters rise and even though things seem to be coming over your head, that you can rise with God above it all. And in those moments to be still and know that he is God. And so while I was being evacuated, I really meditated on that. And to me, God had already anchored me for the storm. He had already prepared me for something that he had reserved to happen in my life at a given time. And so he never left me empty-handed, right? So even before I had the encouragement, I had the faith because he had given it to me. There was some people from a neighboring town that brought their boats in to help evacuate us. To me, that was reserved by God. These people didn't know me. They weren't from Houston. They weren't emergency personnel. They were just citizens of a city that were concerned. But to me, they were brought by God. It's kind of like Jonah and the whale or the big fish, right? God had that reserved just for Jonah. And so, I just encourage women and have been encouraging everybody that's been going through not just the storm, but any type of transition in life where it becomes uncomfortable, it becomes challenging, you want to lose your faith, you want to blame God. I've been encouraging them to realize that even the bad is good because God uses those devastating circumstances to start shaping our life in the direction it should go. And since I carried that perspective and maintained it, I mean, even today, just the outpour of blessings to get into a new home, thousands of dollars that have been provided by my employer, and just, people that I haven't heard from in years, just saying, Dalita, how can I help? God has been putting it on their heart to pour into me in a time of need. And to be quite honest, my need wasn't great. Like I didn't lose absolutely everything. I still had a good portion of my upstairs that was preserved, but there was so much that has come in. It takes you back to God will do exceedingly abundantly above everything that you could ever ask, think, or imagine. And so the storm, while devastating, has actually brought a lot of blessing with it. But, it takes staying in the right perspective to really see it.
Wow. I mean, I didn't realize, I don't think you had shared that part with us about the knock on the door and it being 20 minutes. I mean, tell me a little bit, like, what was going through your mind? I know you said you were trying to rush to gather what you could, like, at any point, did you, were you fearful? Were you anxious? Or how were you feeling at that moment?
I think a little bit of all of that,
Okay.
there's so much that's
Imagine.
going through. I mean, adrenaline really kicks in. And so
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I didn't actually have a moment of true understanding of what was going on until I got to the shelter and walked through the door and saw all of the people there soaking wet. And
Mm,
that's when it hit me.
mm-hmm.
And, I teared up and I said, oh my God, this is actually happening.
Right,
Like,
right,
and I'm in it, I'm
right,
in the
right,
middle of this.
right,
But yeah, of course, fear
right. Mm-hmm.
rises up. And so when we were leaving the apartment complex on the boat, there's this ski jet came shooting past us and it caused our boat to start rocking. And
Oh.
at one point, I thought that we were going to flip over,
Mm-hmm.
but God had already put a song in my heart. And so I
Mm-hmm.
started singing that song the entire time we were on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of it didn't kill the fear. The fear didn't leave,
Mm-hmm. Right.
but it helped me to manage in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
I leaned back on that anchor that God had already given me to
Mm-hmm.
get me through all of the emotion that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, you're in a mixture of emotion.
Right, right. And it's just like our daddy to prepare us beforehand. I mean, I just the week before that you told me, you said that he gave you Psalm 46, and one scripture that comes to my mind is be still and know that I am God. And just the fact that you may not have known like what was coming, but the fact that he gave that to you and prepared your heart beforehand, that's just, I think, another example of his provision in that moment, to prepare us for what's ahead, even though we may not know all the details of that. I wanted to. I was just thinking about when I spoke to you afterwards. There's something you said that's kind of been ringing in my mind. You said that God kind of had you to pick up, and I might be saying it wrong, picking up gems throughout the whole entire process, like hidden gems. And I think
Yes.
that word perspective you used was is so important. So just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I spent a few days in the shelter, and when I came out, my employer was phenomenal and got me a temporary apartment. And that Saturday was like the first day I wasn't at a shelter,
Mm-hmm.
doing anything, trying to, find safety or
Mm-hmm.
safe place. I took time to just, sit still with God and to start processing all this so that I was having the right perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And during that meditation prayer time, God said to me to mind the field, that there were hidden jewels laid in the midst of the devastation,
Mm-hmm.
but it was my job to seek them out, to find them. And, I'm still kind of processing that
Mm-hmm.
thought. He spoke it to me about a month ago now,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm still mining the field and
Mm-hmm.
finding all the places where God had blessings laid out for me. I think sometimes we miss the provision of God because we are not looking in the midst of the devastation. We want everything to be clean, to be
Mm-hmm.
perfect, to go smoothly. But we have to remember that God positions us. And when He positions us, all of our blessings are in that same place.
Mm-hmm.
And so just my own personal conviction and perspective of it is, God, if you allow this into my life, it didn't come to destroy me. And so
Mm-hmm.
if it didn't come to destroy me, then that means there's blessing here. So when he spoke that, I went about just starting to analyze the whole scenario. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
what can I benefit from that God has left behind from all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have that perspective, you miss the blessings of God.
Right. That's so true. And so I'm thinking about some of the things you shared in terms of, well, tell us a little bit about Savage Reserve, that message that you had, and something that you just had like a desire, but it wasn't really a prayer, but God provided. I mean, there was so many like key points that you shared, and I'm not just thinking about, I'm just like exceedingly abundantly, wow, like that's just awesome. So just share that.
Yeah, so I was in two different shelters during the time that I was evacuated. And when I was at the first shelter, the first night we slept on the floor. Like thank
Mm-hmm.
God we had blankets, but not
Mm-hmm.
much else. And God even started providing in that first shelter, blow up mattresses, a crate for my dog, like all of these little comforts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily what I wanted, but they were
Mm-hmm.
comfortable
Mm-hmm.
things. But, spent about 2 nights there, and then got a notice that next day that at 2 p.m. they were moving us to a second shelter. And when you're already displaced and at the mercy of other people, that kind of rattles you. And I was rattled, and it was especially rattled that morning because here it is the third day, and I just want to wash my face and take a bath and smell good, and just be girly. And so it wasn't a prayer that I prayed, but it was a desire for like an exfoliating facial cleanser and some scented body wash. Well, they didn't have any at the shelter I was at. But when I got to the second shelter, there was actually an area set up with a blow-up mattress, bedding, toiletries, clean sheets and towels, a place for my dog with a crate. Like everything was set there. And at the edge of the bed, it said reserved Savage, which is my last name. So that spot with all of those necessities were reserved specifically for me for when I came to that second shelter, because they knew I was coming. But most importantly, God knew that I was going there. And so he remembered, it's amazing how he does give us the desires of our heart, because I didn't pray and ask for things. But when I got to that second shelter, inside the toiletry bag was the 2 items that were in my heart as a desire, the scented body wash and the exfoliating facial cleanser. And I took a picture of it, just as a reminder that through everything that is going on, and even when I don't stop to pray, that God knows what's in my heart. And because he's such a loving father, that he provides it without me even asking for it.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought about that. It just made me smile, that he just does things just because, nothing something that you voice, but like you mentioned, he knew the desires of your heart. I was also thinking about something you shared with us in terms of, we always think about maybe naturally reserved by God could mean just blessings, but you talked about in the Bible study about adversity also being a tool that God can use to train us in terms of, and that also is reserved by God. And I thought that was an interesting perspective. And it's true that we always think about the good, but just as you mentioned earlier, that all things do work together. So that's the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that we don't want to necessarily deal with. So just if you could touch a little bit on that.
Sure. And it's interesting. I've still actually been studying that a little bit more, going back through the story of Saul and David. But, I definitely believe that God uses, and I won't say that he always causes the things, but he will use the circumstances of our life and just situations that we find ourselves in that are not favorable necessarily. He'll use those to begin to shape us and direct our path. And, for me, I didn't tell my whole story, right? Because you can't tell it all.
Right.
There's some things that gotta stay.
Right. Right.
But God even used this storm to discipline me a little bit. And I don't know if I shared in the Bible study, but at the second shelter, I was sitting there that first day and had pulled my Bible out to just read over Psalms 46 again. And some ministers were there, and they came over to the table, and one of them was highly prophetic and very insightful, and just started reading my book. And I actually sat there and got a rebuke by this perfect stranger that God had sent into my life. And, it started me to really think about how God even allows these devastating things to become training tools, right? And to become instruments in his hand to perfect us. And I just, throughout this whole experience, there's been so many little spankings that I've received from God, to shape me and to bring me into the right place. Even as I've been studying about Saul and King David and how they came into their positions and things like that, what I noticed is that there is a pattern forming that in the life of both of them, they were anointed king before they actually took the throne. And in between them being anointed and them taking their position, there were lots of trials and testings that they went through. Throughout the Bible and just about every biblical character that God used, he would call them and tell them, hey, you're going to be called to do these great and mighty things. I'm going to bless you or whatever. and then they go through a series of things that don't add up to what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just the wisdom of God to take even the things that the enemy meant for our evil and for our
Mm-hmm.
destruction, to begin to teach us and to
Mm-hmm.
train us, and, to even teach us about who he is, to train us on his different characters and qualities. And I can say this season, I've just really known him to be El Shaddai, the
Mm-hmm.
all-sufficient God, that everything that I've needed is right there with him. Everything that, I desire is right there with him. And so even in the bad times, the bad situations, those things are working for my good.
Mm-hmm.
Just like he promised, even the bad will work together for the good.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow. It's it's tough to digest, but even in the
It
midst of that,
is.
the yeah, the lessons that he teaches you along the way. Um,
Yeah.
the last thing I just wanted to kind of touch on was something you said, which towards the end of the Bible study, about the whole idea of, so in the beginning I had mentioned about some people talking about Hurricane Harvey and speaking ill against God, and just a lot of things about, questioning God as to why this is happening, what have you. And sometimes we also tend to think that it may have been something we've done when that's not always the case anyway. But something you mentioned in terms of how people watch you go through, and you talked about the glory. And I think it was, I got my notes here, girl. 1 Peter 4:12-14, and it said when his glory is revealed. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that was just important in how people are watching you go through this entire, storm, so to speak, literally and figuratively. So just talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Right. Yeah, so that particular verse talks about how what's happening to us is not uncommon, that these
Mm-hmm.
things happen to everyone, especially those of us that have been called to walk with God,
Mm-hmm.
those of us that have the salvation
Mm-hmm.
promises and are believers. And so it says, this thing that's overtaking you is not uncommon. So don't think about it as if it's something strange,
Mm-hmm.
because we all go through this in one facet or another. And, it talks about how you should actually count it a joy and a privilege and a blessing to suffer the way that Christ did.
Mm-hmm.
And God knows we're not suffering at all the
Right,
way that Christ did, but
right.
we're suffering on
It
our
seems
level.
like it sometimes, right?
Right. It seems like it. It can be quite
Mm-hmm.
devastating, but
Mm-hmm.
it says that that's actually a privilege
Mm-hmm.
to go through those trying times, because it gives God an opportunity to show forth his glory through your life.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for those of us who know the promises of God and have received that salvation promise, to allow that light to shine through us, and especially in the hard moments, so that people can see that our God hasn't abandoned us. He's a
Mm-hmm.
loving father. He cares for us. And if we keep the right perspective and keep the right words coming out of our mouth,
Mm-hmm.
they can see that we're glorifying him in spite of our situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it talks about how, yes, you're going to get through it, and you're going to come forth, and you're going to be blessed through, whatever you're going through, because you're suffering like Christ did. And so you're going to
Mm-hmm.
receive the promises he did. But not only that, but God is going to get glory from what he's able to deliver you out of.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes I believe, and I know this is true for a lot of what's going on in my life,
Mm-hmm.
into your life that seem like devastation and destruction are not always because you did something wrong, or
Mm-hmm.
not always because you need correction.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes God just needs a vessel to work through. And
Mm-hmm.
because you said yes to him, and because you've been faithful, and he knows that he can trust you with trouble, okay, he can trust
Mm-hmm.
you with hardship, and that you're not like Job going to curse him and die and
Mm-hmm.
just give up on the promises. He allows you to go through it so he can bring you out on the other side, so that he can ultimately get the glory and bring other people into the kingdom, back into relationship with him. And so, that goes back to perspective. If you have the right perspective, and you're not blaming God for everything that's going on, he's able to work through you and bring a far greater good than you would have ever imagined through all
Wow.
of it.
Yeah. Trust you with trouble. I just never thought about it like that, but that is so true. I mean, that is so true. And it's in those times that we really see what we're made of. And he's always known what we were made of. He knew how you were going to respond. But we don't always know. We always don't always know our strength either until we go through those times. And so, wow, that's about trust. That's going to be ringing in my ears for a while. I never thought about it like that, but
yeah, that might be the next Bible study topic.
Hey, you never know. You never know. But I just thank you so much for being willing to share your story, to be so transparent with us. I mean, it was really very timely. The word was timely. Everything you shared was it just really resonated with me deeply. And so I just want to two last things. I want to have you to share anything that any last thoughts or final thoughts to anybody who may be going through a storm, not just necessarily, as a result of a disaster or a physical storm transition, as you mentioned in the beginning. What would you say to encourage a young woman or anyone actually going through?
Absolutely. It goes back to Psalms 46:10. Be still and know. And sometimes we get so caught up in what's going on that we're not still enough. We're not quiet enough. We're not alone enough to process everything so that we can know that even though I'm going through this, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to survive it. If God brought me through it 5 years ago, he's going to bring me through it today. And so it really takes, purpose to sit still in the midst of the storm, in the midst of raging waters, to focus on God. And so that's an act of your will. God is not going to force you to do it. He's not going to demand that you do it, but he promises that if you will do it, that he will bring you out. And so in the midst of whatever it is, whether it's a divorce or the loss of a job or maybe the death of a loved one, sometimes it's good to pull back from the situation and just be still. Even if it's for 15 minutes, just be still and let God speak to you so that you will know that he is the Lord. And that means he is the one controlling the circumstance and the situation, even though it doesn't feel like it.
Amen. That's such a powerful, powerful scripture. Be still. Yeah. And sometimes it's everything that can be so, that inundates us, with the media and you're so distracted. You don't have the time I say you shouldn't have, you don't make the time to sit still and really kind of process things and hear from him. It's when we get quiet and we really sit to listen that he's really wants to speak to us. And then so lastly, tell everyone how they can find you, about the Bible study or whatever you want to share in terms of connecting with you.
Absolutely. So I'm personally on Facebook, Dalita Savage. And then the Arise Fellowship is also on Facebook, and we have arisefellowship.org, where you can find out a little bit more about the ministry, what we do, what we teach on. And then if you'd like to become a member, membership is free. And so you can actually create a profile there at arisefellowship.org and join our ministry. So we're working on that portal. We're going to be uploading all of the teaching series, different upcoming events, and, just staying connected to everyone that's connected to the ministry.
Well, thank you so much again, Dalita, for hanging out and just being willing again to share your story. I really, really, really appreciate it. And I hope and pray that this testimony, what you shared and everything we talked about will bless someone and encourage them. Whoever's going through a storm, whether you just come out of a storm, you might be going into a storm, we're all probably in one of those three categories. And so I hope it does bless someone. And so just want to say thank you, everyone, for watching. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, like it, share it. And I'll leave you with this. What are you waiting for? Become God's best right now while you're waiting. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.